Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Takeaway with Alex Newman. Alex, great to have you back again. And it's commencement time. It's June, and so it's graduation time on high school campuses across the country. And with graduation comes censorship. Talk a little bit about what's going on in Illinois about censoring a valedictorian speech.
Well, thanks very much. So at the West Prairie High School, this valedictorian planned to give a speech, and he planned to thank God and to thank Christ. And, the speech was very Christ-centered. The boy who was going to give the speech, he said, Christ is everything. He's the center of my life. How could I not thank him? I live for him. I do everything for him. I got good grades for him. How could I not thank him? And the school said, oh, no, you can't do that. Not allowed. You have to take out all references to God, all references to Jesus from your speech. No free speech rights, apparently. And so the boy was upset about it, and finally he said, well, I don't really want to give a speech. I'll just give a couple of brief remarks. And he said he complied because, Christians are commanded to obey those in authority unless the command is contrary to what God has commanded. But real sad tale, something that's happening across the country. The kids, so, there's this impression out there that just teachers and schools have to censor God and Jesus. Well, now, we see more and more that even students are not allowed to mention the name.
Yeah, that's the angle about this that bothers me. The kid's a valedictorian, right? He worked hard, he achieved the honor. If the kid wants to give his own personal testimony how Christ was important in his life, or he gives thanks to God, why in the world is that considered proselytizing? It can't possibly be. One of the things that made me really angry about the story you reported is the school administrators were acting as if we let you mention Christ or let you mention God. People are going to think we, the administration, are supporting it. To me, that was a very, very much a cop-out and very telling. Basically, what the administration was saying is we're not even sure you have no right to do this. We're telling you can't because we, as your school administrators, don't want to be tarred with the same brush you're going to be tarred with, which is really a tremendous act of moral cowardice.
It is, and he even offered to make a statement up at the front saying that my views do not represent the views of the school or the administrators or anybody, and they still said no. It's hard to fathom that that's how far we've fallen in America, that a high school graduate, a high school valedictorian cannot even talk about his faith in his speech. If he had wanted to talk about transgenderism, or if he had wanted to talk about Satanism, or anything like that, I guarantee you the school would have said that was fine. But how dare he mention God or Jesus? The Jesus haters are really completely in control of the government education system, and Christian parents are naively feeding their children to this beast.
And I know for a fact that if you had an Islamic student graduate from high school who wanted to thank his God, that would not be a problem either. And it's amazing to me how in the schools, and you see this with the textbook wars, right? Why are we teaching kids to recite the 5 pillars of Islam? There's a new story going on right now about a high school asking all the kids in the class to fast for Ramadan as a spiritual exercise in a public school. All this is acceptable because they call it cultural knowledge, right? Studying Islam, making kids write out in Arabic, Allah is the one God. That's considered a cultural exercise, which is also why we can't teach about Christ, because Christ isn't cultural. People actually believe that. And these kind of weird ways that progressives twist themselves into pretzels. We saw what happened just now with the Supreme Court sort of tepidly defending the right of the individual baker not to have to bake gay cakes. Didn't strike down the law, but at least made that argument. I have to believe that if this was ever taken far enough, I can't imagine the Supreme Court telling this kid that, yeah, you got to shut up. You're not allowed to mention that. If you're on any public circumstance, in any public forum, you're not allowed to mention Jesus. I just don't see that holding up in a court of law.
No, the Supreme Court has actually made clear that students maintain their free speech rights. You don't give up your rights just because you walk into a government school. But they don't really care about the law. The First Amendment is very, very clear. Congress shall make no law, right? So even the Supreme Court's application of the First Amendment to government schools, when they banned prayer and banned the Bible in schools, which were, used all across the United States, that was outrageous. The First Amendment, anybody can pick up a copy of the Constitution and read it, says Congress shall make no law. Congress had made no law, and therefore the Supreme Court should have nothing to say about whether, school in some town in Iowa is opening the day with a prayer, or whether a valedictorian is praying. So we really are, descending very quickly as a nation. And you're right, any kind of other practice would be tolerated. They tell the kids to go do yoga, which is, of course, a Hindu spiritual practice. They tell the kids, as you mentioned, to fast for Ramadan. We just read a story the other day about how they had the kids writing out Allah is the only God and Muhammad is his messenger, this thing in calligraphy under the excuse of teaching the children Arabic calligraphy. I mean, it's unbelievable. Can you imagine if they had the kids writing out the Lord's Prayer, or if they had the kids writing out the Ten Commandments as a cultural exercise? There would have been liberal heads exploding.
Yeah, and it is remarkable what you also said. There's a big difference between praying in school, which I perfectly believe is protected speech too. But this poor kid was not asking to pray. He didn't start with a prayer. He was not going to lead them in prayer. He was not going to pray over them. He simply was going to mention Christ as his spiritual guide, as his savior. And that was too much for this cowardly group of administrators. And I can't believe, again, I'm being repetitive now, but I can't believe that any legal action could have been meaningfully taken against him for doing so.